Keep your lamp trimmed and burning. Keep your lamp trimmed and burning. Keep your lamp trimmed and burning. And see what the Lord have done. Well, now don't get worried. Don't get worried. Oh, don't get worried. See what the Lord have done. Keep your lamp trimmed and burning. Keep your lamp trimmed and burning. Keep your lamp.
We talked today in class about some of the vocabulary that surrounds the abolitionist movement and the women's suffrage movement. And today, or this evening, we are going to take a little closer look at slavery and the abolitionist movement. So slavery was a big deal in America during the 1800s. After the invention of the cotton gin, the United States saw a big increase in slave labor, and we talked about that last week. Slaves were brought over from Africa on boats that were packed with as many people as they could carry. And in this picture, you can see what was a plan for where to place everyone. There were a lot of people that were crammed into such a small space. There was absolutely no regard for these people's comfort. There was no sanitary conditions. Many times they didn't have enough room to move around at all. They didn't have the food or water that they needed. Here's a brief description of a ship that carried slaves. These ships were called slavers. It said, conditions aboard the slave ships were wretched. Men, women, and children crammed into every available space, denied adequate room, food, or breathing space. The stench was appalling, the atmosphere inhumane to say the least. Now, once the slaves landed in America, they were sold immediately into slavery, sometimes at auction in a very inhumane way, almost like someone would sell cattle instead of a human being. So the slaves were brought to the United States mostly to work on plantations in the southern part of our country. And you can see here there's a picture of some slaves that were working in a cotton field. They were treated harshly, and they were considered property instead of people. The work for a slave on a plantation was difficult. It lasted from sunup to sundown. They rarely had adequate breaks from work. They had to eat out in the field, simple meals like a cake made of cornmeal and water that they cooked over an open fire, and that was all they had for the day. Often chains were used to keep slaves from running away. Here's a picture of some chains that might have been used. And in extreme cases, neck clamps and pieces of metal in the face and mouth were used to keep the slaves under control or even to punish them. More often than not, the slaves were beaten with whips, sticks, and other things. It was really not a good thing at all. So in answer to this inhumane treatment, a movement called the abolitionist movement began. To abolish, we said, means to get rid of something, and their goal was to get rid of slavery completely. People in the North and South felt that it was a different issue about slavery. In the North, there was mostly factories and industry and as a way of making a living, and in the South, the plantations depended on the slaves to grow, gather, and prepare what they grew for market. One of the most famous abolitionists was Frederick Douglass, and this is a picture of him, as you remember from class today. And he grew up as a slave, but was able to escape and became a very vocal person in the cause. His speeches influenced many people to support the equality of men, no matter what color they were. He spoke of the horrors of slavery and painted a picture of what slavery was really like from firsthand experience. Many had no idea how harsh things were in that situation, and they listened to and supported Frederick Douglass. Eventually, Frederick Douglass started an abolitionist newspaper called the North Star. This newspaper informed people of happenings in the abolitionist movement. Another strong supporter of abolition was William Lloyd Garrison. Mr. Garrison owned a newspaper called The Liberator that was strongly against slavery. He believed in the immediate freedom of all slaves. Now, as you can see, it was not just men, but also women who supported the abolitionist cause. This is Harriet Tubman. She was a slave that escaped to freedom in the North, but she believed in helping others escape, so she became what's called a conductor on the Underground Railroad, and we spoke of this in class today as well. The Underground Railroad was not an underground or an actual railroad. It was a way to secretly take slaves to freedom in the North and in Canada. Most of the time, the conductors or the people that led the way would have to travel at night. This is a map of the different Underground Railroad paths. You can see they go northward all the way up to Canada or even out of Florida to escape to another country by ship. Now, once slaves made it north, they were not always safe and had to sometimes travel a long way before they were truly free of their owners. Runaway slaves had very little to take with them, other than an extra shirt and some food scraps, or if anything at all. They would tie the scraps of food in the shirt and tie it to a stick, and the stick was used as a walking stick and as protection if dogs were sent after the slave. Slave catchers were hired to find slaves and bring them back to their owners. Many people in the North wanted the slaves to be free and supported the Underground Railroad. There were songs, signals, and codes that were used as ways for the people of the Underground Railroad system to communicate their plans. One of those ways was quilt patterns. Now, this is a picture of some of the different quilt patterns of the time. They meant different things to the railroad conductors. The simple signals were if there was a quilt hung on the front porch, then it was safe to come in. If it was hanging in the back, then the conductor knew it wasn't safe and they moved on. Another supporter of the abolitionist movement was a woman named Harriet Beecher Stowe. She wrote a famous book that told the story of slavery like no one else had done before. This book was called Uncle Tom's Cabin. It told the horrors of slavery, and this book spread throughout England and America and was a surprising revelation to some about the harshness of slavery. Now, the story of slavery in our country is a long and sad one, and the abolitionist movement was the beginning of the realization that it was morally wrong to own other human beings and to treat them with such disregard. Equality for all human beings was what many felt that our country was established for. That was the whole point of the democracy, and they felt that the Constitution supported that freedom, even for slaves. So I hope that this helped clarify some of the issues of slavery and the abolitionist movement in our country, and I hope that you got all the information you needed. If not, as usual, you can pause, rewind, re-listen to, re-watch this video, and if you have any questions about anything, let me know when you come to class tomorrow, and I hope that you have a good evening, and we'll see you tomorrow.